was just announced. The attack also is made on all naval and military activities on the principal island of Oahu.
What we'll talk to you about tonight is a moment about what this is. You know, when you go to a traditional stage play, this is a kind of an invisible magic wall through which you and I get to watch characters play out their lives. And we can see and hear them, and it seems as if they can't see or hear us, and that's kind of what makes it magic. And that's about showing us what's going on in their lives. Reader's Theater, as you'll see in a few moments, is our characters are going to knock that wall down, and they're going to reach out directly to you to tell you a story, and with your help, pull you in, using your imagination to help tell that story. I guess really I'm talking about the difference between showing and telling. And you'll see what we mean in just a few moments. So in the meantime, if you would, sit back, relax, turn down those cell phones, if you would. And with the help of Gene Shepard, who is a master storyteller, about whom you probably read a little bit in the brochure. You might have heard some of his voice as we tried to simulate AM radio there, for those of you who remember AM radio. And we thank you so much once again for being here. And if you really enjoyed this tonight, come back and see us Saturday night for our closing performance, or tell your friends. We will be up lots of seats.
Okay, now when he gets that curtain.
Oh. So,
wait, I'm sorry.
I would like to tell you a story.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and put him.
Actually, we'd like to tell you a story.
Go ahead and put him on. Go ahead and put him down.
Ready? Ready?
Yes. Shepard!
A wave of numbness surged through my body with stunning force. At last I knew what it was like to be sitting there with a brass hat on your skull and those straps around your wrists and ankles as the warden pulls the big switch.
I was finished. Done. It had all come to this. Somehow I always known it would.
It had all started in the first grade in the Warren G. Harding School, where I was one amongst a rabble of wrestly, sweaty, peanut butter and jelly sandwich eaters. But it was not until the third month of school that I became dimly aware of a curse that would follow me throughout all my life, along with
Martin Perlmutter?
Here.
Schwartz?
Here.
Chester Wozniewski?
Here.
Helen Weathers? And poor old Xavier Zambarbieri.
I was a member of the alphabetical ghetto that sat in the back of the classroom.
Medical science is now beginning to realize that those of us at the end of the alphabet live shorter lives,
Sweat more.
And are far jumpier than those in the B's and E's.
And even M's and L's.
People at the tail end of the alphabet grow up accepting the fact that everybody comes first.
The Warren G. Harding School had an almost mystic belief in the alphabet. If you were a P, you sat behind every O, regardless of myopia.
Me and Schwartz and Wozniewski, well, we sat so far back in the classroom that the blackboard was only a vague rumor to us.
Miss Shields, the teacher,
Was a shifting figure in the haze on the distant horizon.
Her voice a faint but ominous drone punctuated by squeaking chalk. Now, within a short time, though, I became adept at reading her inflection, and if not the content of those far-off sounds, instantly sensing when danger was looming.
Danger meant simply being called on.
Kids in the front of the classroom didn't know the meaning of danger.
Ace test takers, they loved nothing more than to display their immense knowledge by waving their hands frantically even before the questions were asked.
They were the smartasses who went on to become corporate presidents, TV talk show guests, and the owner of cabin cruisers.
Now, we in the back of the classroom followed a different path.
since we could neither hear nor see, we had only one course open if we were going to pass with reasonable grades.
First of all, it was imperative never to be caught out in the open. If possible, it's not to be seen at all.
Each one of us evolved his or her own methods of survival.
Helen Weathers was so nervous, her expression so sad, her profuse perspiration under stress so pathetic that the teacher never had the heart to call on her.
Wozniewski hid behind books, and that worked all right until one day he hid behind...
Plastic Man meets the Thing?
Martin Perlmutter had the kind of face you can't remember even when you're looking at it. So he didn't have to hide.
One day during an oral quiz, though,
Always a dangerous time for all of us.
Perlmutter displayed the stuff of champions.
Miss Shields unaccountably called on him during an incomprehensible
sensible discussion of isosceles triangles.
We thought Perlmutter wasn't finished, but we had underestimated him. Without missing a beat, his face turned bright purple. His eyes bulged like a pair of overripe grapes. His neck throbbed.
And a spectacular geyser of blood burst from both nostrils.
This is terrible, Miss Shields shouted.
She scooped him up in her muscular, hairy arms and took him off to the principal's office, where he was excused from school for the rest of the day.
She never called on him again.
Dan Barbieri, a devoted Catholic, relied almost exclusively on prayer.
But in her case, it was academic, since she sat so far back in the classroom, deep among the galoshes, that we couldn't even see her.
Schwartz employed the simple but effective technique of slowly lowering himself into his seat until only his crew cut showed above the top of his desk during risky periods of interrogation.
I made it a point to wear bland-colored clothes, the better to blend into the background.
I learned to weave my body from side to side, dropping a shoulder here, shifting my neck a few degrees to the right there, always with the object in mind of keeping a line of kids between me and the teacher's eagle eye.
The last and possibly most important tactic of classroom survival was thought control.
Yes, whenever danger loomed, it was necessary to repeat silently, with intense concentration, the hypnotic command,
You will not call on me. You will not call on me.
And this would sound out in visible waves of powerful thought energy until the teacher's mind was mysteriously clouded. And after endless hours of rehearsal, though, I developed my fourth and final gambit.
my cute look.
A shy, boyish smile of such disarming cuddliness as to be lethal in its effectiveness.
Flashed it, of course, only with great caution. During crucial moments, like when Miss Shields sat down to fill out my report card, I knew that my cute look would pop into her mind. And that's all I needed.
Since she had nothing else to go on other than her natural for her to put that down.
A B, which is all I ever needed out of life.
So it was that I weaved, bobbed, truckled, and beamed my way through grade after grade at Warren G. Harding Elementary School. Perlmutter and Schwartz and Wisniewski and Helen Weathers and I, as well as
Poor old Francis Xavier and Barbieri
sat on the shore as the deepening river of education flowed by us, unheard, unseen.
But my true identity as a faker, it was never really in danger of exposure, and finally the big day came.
Graduation. We sang the Warren G. Harding fight song, accompanied by Miss Bundy, the elementary school teacher, on the piano.
Then a famous local undertaker and Chevrolet dealer delivered a mind-numbing oration on
How his generation was passing the torch of civilization from its faltering hands into our youthful, energetic, and idealistic hands.
Naturally, we were seated alphabetically, so those of us in the rear only caught a few disjointed phrases.
Schwartz, sweating profusely from his new sports coat, whispered, "What's all this stuff about torches? I didn't get no torch."
I don't know. I must have given him to the front of the class.
Yeah, but I got my diploma. It was official. I was a graduate. And that summer sped by in a blur.
In September, I'd be a full-fledged high school kid.
The guys in high school had always seemed to be remote, godlike creatures who played all sports, wore thick sweaters with letters on them, and hung around
Big Bill Stryden.
What actually happened in junior high and high school, that was never really mentioned, at least of us, among the R's and the Y's.
Well, the first omen of evil struck early in September, just a few days before school was to open.
There's some mail for you.
My mother said.
Mail? For me?
Yeah, I was surprised. I received very little mail, except for the occasional announcement from the
International Crime Detection Institute of East St. Louis, Illinois, informing me that I was frittering my life away when I could be earning big money spotting crooks.
I ripped open the envelope and found a printed form stating that
High school registration and classes would begin next Monday, and that I was assigned to Miss Snyder, to whom I would report at 8:30 a.m. period. Hey, Schwartz!
I barked into the phone.
Did you get your card?
Yeah, Schwartz said.
What's this registration stuff?
I don't really know. I guess that's where you pick the teachers and the classes and all the stuff you want to take.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the dreams of youth.
Schwartz, Helen, Chester, and the whole crowd of us rode the bus to school. I mean, we carried rulers, fountain pens, erasers.
A whole arsenal of equipment for us on the battlefields of higher learning.
Schwartz had a T-square made of red plastic and a matching compass. I don't really know what for.
I clutched the brown and white fake marble Parker automatic pencil that my Aunt Glenn had given me for Christmas. Yes.
Ready for anything.
I had lain in bed making plans for the night before. This time, I would grab the front seat in every class, listen to every word, and no longer would I duck and dodge like I had been between the screen and kids. It was all behind me now.
Finally, the bus rolled up, and we piled out. Some on the run yelling hysterically, others ashen-faced and stiff-legged with terror. A few pretended like it was just another bus ride.
The school, it loomed over us like the walls of the Grand Canyon. It was made of this dull red brick.
It stretched out to either horizon.
Thousands of kids milled around the outside, waiting for the doors to open. And girls bigger than my Aunt Clara towered over me, and they had these bumps in their sweaters, like Gene Autry used to sing to in their cowboy TV shows.
Well, a blind torrent of fear washed over me. For a while, I'd been one of the truly big men at Warren G. Harding Elementary, but now
I was nothing. I clinging to my lunch bag with a sweaty hand. I hunted frantically for a familiar face, but Schwartz and Martin and Perlmutter, they had all been swallowed up.
I was carried forward by this sound, ring, and a huge sword of kids just carried me through the huge front doors. Great staircases with rivers of kids streamed in all directions.
My card read, "Report to room 220. Kids all around me hollered and screamed, and they laughed back and forth.
They all seemed to know one another.
I never felt so alone. The halls stretched so far in both directions that I couldn't even see the ends. Lockers banged, and I smelled for the first time.
Oh, that indescribable high school building aroma. A rich fragrance made up of thousands of bodies, floor wax, chalk, leftover tuna fish sandwiches, chlorine from the swimming pool, disinfectant from the bathrooms, and fermenting
jockstraps from the gym.
I tried to read the numbers on the doors as I was swept onward like a stick in a rushing river.
It's 205, that was 207, 214, 218, 220.
My homeroom. Well, there she is, a plump lady, sitting in gray clothes, hair, and face, sitting like an enigmatic Buddha at a gray metal desk at the head of the room.
Somehow, I sensed that she wasn't going to be a pushover for my cute look, but I put it on at full candle power.
She glanced up and peered at me coldly through her rimless glasses. "Your card, please. Take that seat there behind Roskowski. He's the one in the purple sweater."
I walked down the aisles between the alien faces all the way to my seat in the back.
It was, of course, in the last row. And it would be mine for the next 4 years.
I peered around the room, and I was the only delegate from room 220 at Warren G. Harding.
Miss Snyder stood at the blackboard and said, "You students are already enrolled for your courses and you will be required to take. Here are your program cards."
She dealt out these 3x5 blue cards, and each card was neatly lined with 8 periods, and after each period was the name of a teacher, a subject, and even a classroom. One was labeled lunch, another study. Every minute of my day was laid out for me.
So much for my dreams of freedom. So I sat there in silence, staring at my blue card, lost in dark thoughts, and then the bell rang again.
Snyder spoke. "Students, this is your first day in high school. You are no longer in grade school. If you work hard, you will do well. But if you don't, you will regret it. Your first class will begin in 5 minutes. Any questions?"
The starting gate had opened. I had thundered a couple of 100 feet, and then a mob hit me, and all of a sudden I realized I have no idea where I'm going.
As the crowd surged around me, I struggled to read that program card. All I could make out was room 127. I only had a minute to make it. So at 101, 105, 109, 112, 117, 127, just in time. Already the class was 3/4 full.
I was Schwartz, and Martin, and Chester, and even Helen Weathers, but even poor old Francis Xavier Zambarbieri. Whatever this was, I wasn't going to have to go through it alone.
Schwartz smiled weakly.
Helen Withers giggled until she saw.
At the same moment I did.
Miss Prittinger standing motionless at the blackboard. All right, settle down. Let's get organized. We sit alphabetically in this class. A's up here in the front to my right. Get going.
I trudged behind Schwartz and Helen Weathers toward the dim recesses of the back of the classroom. Well, at least I'd be among friends. It's about a mile and a half to the blackboard.
I sat bolt upright in my seat, determined to catch every word.
Class, my name is Miss Prittinger.
Still had no idea what she taught.
I would soon find out.
If you work hard in class, you'll have no trouble. If you don't, I promise you nothing.
I leaned forward in my desk, scribbling madly in my notebook.
Class, my name is Miss Pritchard. If you work hard, you will have no trouble. If you don't, I promise you nothing.
She turned, picked up a piece of chalk, and began to scrawl huge block letters on the blackboard.
A-L-G-E-B-R-A?
That is the subject of this course.
Schwartz asked aloud, algebra? What the heck is that?
Algebra is the mathematics of abstract numbers. I will now illustrate. If y equals 5 and x equals 2, what does the following mean? X plus y equals...
How the hell can you add X's and Y's?
I've had enough trouble with 2s and 3s. And already the crowd in the front of the room was waving their hands crazily to answer Prittinger's question.
The class wasn't 30 seconds old and I was 6 weeks behind. I sank lower in my seat again, faint buzzing in my ears. Instinctively, I began to weave. I knew it was all over.
Schwartz hunched lower and then began to emit a high, then whimpering sound.
Helen Weathers had flung up a thin spray of sweat.
Chester's skin had changed to the color of the cupboards in the back of the room.
And from behind me, I could hear the faint, steady click of Francis Xavier Barbieri's prayer beads on her desk.
Second by second, minute by minute, eon by eon, that first algebra class droned on. And I realized that for the first time in my life, I'd run up against something that was completely opaque and unlearnable.
And there was no way to debate it.
That night, I ate dinner in sober silence as the family yapped on, still living back in the days when I was known to all of them as the smartest little son of a bee ever to be coming along on Cleveland Street.
Boy, look at the stuff these kids are learning these days.
My father said as he hefted my algebra book in his bowling hand and rifled through the pages.
What is this X and Y stuff?
Yeah, it ain't much.
What do you mean it ain't much?
His eyes glowed with pride at the idea his kid had mastered algebra in only one day.
It's abstract mathematics. That's all it is.
The old man knew he'd been totally outclassed. Even my mother had stopped stirring the gravy for a few seconds.
That night, sleep did not come easily.
In fact, it was only the first of many sleepless nights to come as algebra class by algebra class, my terror grew.
All my other subjects were a total breeze.
Yeah, well, for example, my years of experience came into full flower when I was in other classes.
In social studies, for example, the more you hooked it up, the better the grades.
On those rare occasions when asked a question, I would stand slowly with a yet open and troubled look and say,
Well, Miss Harris, sir, I guess it depends on how you view it. Objectively, which naturally is too simple, or subjectively, in which case many factors must be taken into consideration.
Mrs. Harris, with a snort of pleasure, would bellow, right, there are many diverse elements which...
After which she was good for a 40-minute solo.
Every morning at 8:35, however, was another story. I marched with leaden feet and quaking bowels into Miss Prittinger's torture chamber.
By the 6th week, I knew without the shadow of a doubt, after all these years, I was going to fail. I mean, fail. True, Prittinger had not yet been able to catch me out in the open, but I was using every trick of the trade.
But I knew that inevitably, one day, the icy hand of truth would expose me for the entire world to see.
Prittinger was of the new school, meaning she believed that kids, theoretically motivated by an insatiable thirst for knowledge, would devour algebra in large chunks, making the final examination a mere formality. They were graded on performance in class.
Since I had no classroom performance, my doom was sealed.
Schwartz fell into the non-performance category too.
Helen had developed deep hollows under her eyes.
While Chester had almost completely disappeared. Dan Barbieri had taken to feverishly consuming community papers during class.
The first hints of spring began to appear. Birds twittered, flower buds unfurled. But men on death row were impervious to such intimations of life quickening. Soon everyone would know
that I knew less about algebra than Ralph, Miss Gammy's big Airedale, who liked to pee on my mother's rose bush.
Prittinger had informed them that the final exam, covering a year's work in algebra, would be given on Friday the following week.
One more week of stardom on Cleveland Street.
ever since my devastating rejoinder at the dinner table about abstract mathematics, my stock had been the hottest in the neighborhood. My opinions were asked on financial matters, world affairs, even the infield problems of the Chicago White Sox.
Even Ralph would have more respect than I deserved. At least he didn't pretend to be anything but what he was.
Wednesday, 2 days before the end, arrived like any other spring day. A faint breeze drifted in from the south, bringing with it hints of long summer afternoons to come, swung bats, nights in the lilac bushes.
I stumped into algebra class, feeling distinctly like the last soul aboard the Titanic as she was about to plunge to the bottom. I took my seat in the back among the rest of the condemned.
The class began. Prittinger's chalk squeaked, hands waved. My nod of fear, by now an old friend, sputtered in my gut.
In the past week, it had grown to roughly the size of a $2 watermelon.
Oh, true, I'd avoided being called on even once during the entire year. But it was a hollow victory, and I knew it.
Minute after minute inched slowly by as I ducked and I dodged, Prittinger firing question after question at the class. Glancing at my Mickey Mouse watch, which I had been given for Christmas, I noted with deep relief that less than 2 minutes remained before the bell.
It was then that I made my fatal mistake. The mistake that every guerrilla fighter eventually makes.
I broke cover.
On this fateful Wednesday, lulled by the sun, by the gentle sound of a tennis ball out of the tennis courts, by the steady drone of Prittinger's voice, by the fact that there were just 2 minutes to go, my mind slowly drifted off into a haze of daydream. I spotted a tiny mote of dust drifting down through a slanting ray of sunshine. I watched its slow, undulating flight like some microscopic silver bird.
Shepherd!
Oh, for a split second, I thought I'd been jabbed with an electric cattle prod.
Prittinger's voice, loud and commanding, was pronouncing his name.
She was calling on me. Oh, no, man. With a single minute to go, she had nailed me.
I heard Schwartz bleat a high, quavering laugh. I knew what it meant.
Oh no, if they had gotten him, the greatest master of them all, there's no hope for any of us.
As I stood slowly at my seat, frantically biding for time, I saw a great huddle forming beneath Helen Weather's desk. It wasn't all sweat.
Chester had sunk to the floor beneath her desk.
And Frances Sambarbieri's teeth were clattering so loud you could barely hear her Hail Marys.
Come to the board, please. If x equals 2 and y equals -1, what is the value of c in this equation?
At the board,
Totally unfamiliar territory to me.
I stared at what seemed like the first equation I had ever seen.
It was well in a yard and a half long.
And it was lacerated by mysterious crooked lines and fractions and parentheses, and miniature 2's hovering above the thing like tiny barnacles. And then the x's and y's were jumbled in crazy abandon. And at the end of this nightmare was a tiny little equal sign, and on the other of that equal sign was a 0.
Zero. All this crap adds up to nothing.
Prittinger stood to one side, arms folded, wearing an expression that said, "At last I've nailed the little bastard."
I glanced back at the class. It was one of the truly educational moments of my life.
The entire mob, including Schwartz and Chester and even Francis Xavier Sambarbieri, they were grinning happily, licking their chops at the expectation of my imminent crucifixion.
When a true disaster strikes, we have no friends.
And there's nothing a phony loves more in this world than to see another phony get what's coming to him.
The value of c, please!
The equation blurred before my eyes. The value of C. What the heck was it? What did a C look like anyway? Or an A? Or a B? Oh, good heavens, I'd forgotten the alphabet.
C, please!
desperately. I tried to come up with a number, any number.
The answer, please!
I can't even remember my name. My watering eyes scanned the room in vain. For a sympathetic face, finally I focused on Helen's sweater.
There was a big block number on it.
3.
What's that?
3.
Pritinger staggered backward, her glasses jolted down to the tip of her nose. How in the world did you know that?
The class was in an uproar. I caught a glimpse of Schwartz, his face pale with shock. I had caught one of the fat part of the bat. It was a true miracle. I'd walked on water.
Instantly, the old instincts took over. In a cool, level voice, I answered Pricketcher's rhetorical question. Ma'am, I used empirical means to derive the answer.
On cue, the bell rang. The class was over.
With the swiftness born of long experience, I was out of the room even before the echo of the bell had ceased. The guerrilla's code is always hit and run.
A legend had been born. That afternoon, as I sauntered home from school, feeling at least 12 and a half feet tall,
Schwartz skulked next to him, silent, moody, kicking at passing frogs.
With the benign air of a baron bestowing largesse upon a wretched serf, I offered to buy Schwartz a fudgesicle.
Schwartz refused with a snarl.
Why Schwartz seems to be troubling you.
You phony jerk, he said to him. You know what you can do with your stupid fudgesicle, you son of a bitch.
Me? A phony? Why'd you say an unkind thing like that?
You fake. You studied.
Inevitably, those of us who are more gifted must leave those less fortunate behind in the races of life.
Okay, the next morning, Thursday, I swaggered into algebra class with head high.
Miss Pritinger, her eyes glowing with admiration, smiled warmly at him.
Hi, Pitt, I said with a casual flip of a hand. We abstract mathematicians, we have an unspoken bond.
Naturally, I was not called on during that period. After all, I'd proved myself beyond any doubt.
After class, beaming at me with the intimacy of a fellow zealot, Miss Pritinger asked me to stay on for a few moments.
Look, it would be pointless for my only A-plus student to waste time on our little test tomorrow. Would you mind helping me grade the papers?
Gosh, Pitt, I don't know. I was looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And if you really need me, I'll be glad to help.
It was a masterstroke.
I would appreciate it, she said. I need somebody who really knows their stuff. And most of these kids are faking it.
2 days later, together, we graded the papers of our peers.
I showed no mercy, of course. Algebra is an absolute science.
And there can be no margin for mercy or kindness in matters of the mind.